I never really lived until I turned 64. I thought to myself, what had held me back all these years? What had I deprived myself of? This questioning inside felt both like a rebuke and an awakening. Bruce didn't say anything. He just watched me, and that gave me courage. He supported me not with his hands, but with his eyes. As my fingers slowly grabbed the straps and pulled them down. Oh, hi there. I didn't see you. I was just sharing a little story about something I went through. Let me start over so you can get the full picture of how it all unfolded. I was 64 years old, and honestly, I never thought something as simple as cleaning up would lead to this. All thanks to my step-grandson. Suddenly showing up, it had been 12 years since my husband, David, passed away, leaving me lonely and widowed for far too long. Late one morning, I decided to tackle the one thing I had been putting off for years, cleaning out the basement. That chaotic little corner of the house had always tightened my chest whenever I thought of it. But I'd finally gathered the courage to face it. The basement was a dusty room full of old boxes, musty-smelling junk, and memories of a lifetime. The first box I opened revealed something that caught me completely off guard. An old photo album from my younger days. As I flipped through it, one photo stood out. It was from a beach party. There I was, holding a margarita in one hand, wearing a bright orange bikini, laughing like I didn't have a care in the world. A carefree young version of myself, beaming with joy, stared back at me. Looking at that photo stirred something deep inside me, a mix of warmth and sadness. Memories I had buried long ago. Desires and excitement I had suppressed all came rushing back. Just then, I heard a sound coming from the basement door. Startled, I turned around to see Bruce, my step-grandson, standing there. I hadn't seen him in 4 years. He looked broader now, more grown-up, with that familiar smile of his. The last time I saw him, he was 23. Now he must have been 27. Surprise, he said, lifting a coffee cup in the air. Bruce, when did you get here? I asked, caught off guard, but genuinely happy to see him. Just now, he replied, making his way down the stairs. Saw your car outside and figured I'd come in. Looks like you could use some help. I was about to say, no, I've got this. But before I could, he had already walked over with a determined look on his face. His eyes landed on the album I was holding. What's this? He asked before I could snatch the photo out of his hand. I froze for a moment. His eyes were locked on the picture of my younger self at the beach. He stared at it for what felt like an eternity before turning to me. This you? Well, yeah, I said with a nervous laugh. My wild years back in the day. Bruce's gaze shifted from the photo back to me. There was something in his eyes, a mix of admiration and surprise. It was both unsettling and oddly warming. Wow, he said. It's weird to think of you like this. But impressive, he added with a smile. His words made me blush, but they also stirred something inside me. Feelings I couldn't quite place. I thought about how David had never shown me that kind of admiration, even when I was younger. All right, enough with the trip down memory lane, I said quickly, closing the album. We've got to start hauling these old boxes out of here. But Bruce gently stopped my hands as I tried to close the album. We really need to look at this, he said, half joking, half serious. It's unbelievable seeing you so young, vibrant, and different. Come on, let's look a little more. I hesitated. Not all the pictures in that album were innocent. Beyond the carefree beach snapshots, there were bolder photos, moments that captured the wilder side of my youth. But seeing how fascinated Bruce was and feeling the admiration in his eyes, I couldn't say no. All right, I said with a small smile. But some of these photos might be a bit much. Bruce chuckled and nodded. I'm sure everything's great, he said, taking the album into his lap as he sat down beside me. His breath was close enough to brush my skin. As we flipped through the pages, the beach party photos gave way to snapshots of my college years, nights in nightclubs, and moments of youthful abandon. One photo showed me in a tight, backless red dress, dancing tipsily. Bruce lingered on that one, staring at it a little too long. This is really you? He asked, his eyes darting between the photo and me, his face lighting up with a mix of awe and curiosity. Yeah, I replied a little bashfully. It was just youth, you know? Things were different back then. Bruce was silent for a moment before finally saying, You're incredible. He paused, then added, All this time, I've only ever thought of you as my grandmother. But you were like a total, I don't know, party girl? His words made me blush, but at the same time, they stirred something inside me. I thought about how David had never looked at me that way. or shown that kind of interest. Even when we were young. Bruce, though, was different. As we kept flipping through the album, the photos got bolder. There was one of me laughing with friends, wearing a short pair of shorts and a bikini top. Another showed me dancing in a nightclub in a plunging black dress. "It's a privilege to see these," Bruce said softly. "Even when you were younger, your beauty was breathtaking." David was one lucky man. His words warmed me, but they also made me feel something else, something strange. The more I felt Bruce's attention and admiration, the more I realized there was a pull between us. He was like the kind of man I had dreamed of when I was younger, confident, openly admiring and eager to discover the parts of me I had kept hidden. When we reached the last page, Bruce closed the album but didn't move his eyes from me. "You're truly extraordinary," he said in a low voice. I was surprised and moved by his words. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me that way or said such things to me. As my eyes locked with Bruce's, I felt the air between us grow heavier. Despite the cold, dusty atmosphere of the basement, a warmth rose inside me. "You haven't aged a day," he said softly. "You still look young and absolutely beautiful." His compliment took my breath away. Even in my youth, I wasn't used to hearing words like that. My heart beat a little faster, and I felt a slight warmth creeping into my cheeks. "Thank you, Bruce," I said, my voice soft. "But there's no hiding the fact that I've aged." Still, I paused, gathering my courage. Maybe I've gotten older, but I haven't lost touch with my desires. I've never let go of them. Bruce smiled. His green eyes locked on mine, unwavering. "I can feel that," he said. "You're not just beautiful, you're absolutely captivating." I couldn't help but let my eyes wander over his broad, athletic frame for a moment. His tall stature, wide shoulders, and slightly curled blonde hair gave him the air of a movie star. The way he smiled, holding the bottle of wine, struck me with its thoughtfulness. "I hope you like it," Bruce said softly. "Like it?" I replied, surprised. "Bruce, this is my favorite wine." "How did you know that?" He shrugged, his expression a mix of confidence and reluctance to explain. "I noticed little things when I was younger. I guess I remembered right." The realization that he had remembered something so personal, so specific, touched me deeply. "Bruce," I said softly, "this is so thoughtful. Thank you." He opened the bottle with ease, pouring the wine into 2 glasses. Handing one to me, he said with a warm smile, "Then let's share some good memories tonight, Elizabeth." I raised my glass, and we toasted. As I took the first sip, the familiar taste of danced on my tongue. But my eyes remained fixed on Bruce. His presence was magnetic, not just because of his looks, but because of the way he carried himself, the way he listened and understood me. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, his words lighting sparks of connection and curiosity within me. As the wine glasses grew empty, Bruce's gaze locked onto mine again. There was something in his eyes, warmth and intensity that pulled at me in ways I couldn't describe. Suddenly, Bruce paused, setting his glass down on the table. When his eyes met mine again, they held a determination that made my breath catch. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice low and steady, but filled with an emotion he couldn't hide. I realized my breathing had quickened, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yes, Bruce?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady as they gently covered mine. The sensation sent a rush of emotion surging through me. "I know I shouldn't say this," he began, "but when I look at you, I can't stop myself. You're not just incredibly beautiful, you're so much more than I ever imagined." His words echoed in my mind, stirring feelings I had buried long ago. My face flushed as I struggled to respond. "Bruce, you—" I started, but my words faltered. Before I could continue, he hesitated only briefly before leaning closer. My heart felt like it was about to stop as I watched him approach. I knew I should say no, that I should push away the growing tension. But I couldn't fight the powerful pull I felt toward him. When his lips met mine, the kiss was gentle yet deep, deliberate yet tender. In that instant, the world around us seemed to fall away. That kiss awakened something within me. Desires I had suppressed for years flooding back all at once. His strong hands moved to my waist, and I let myself surrender completely to the moment. As his lips finally pulled away, the air between us felt thick with lingering tension. My heart was still racing as I looked at him, hoping my eyes could somehow convey the emotions swirling inside me. Words felt impossible, and yet, driven by an impulse I couldn't ignore, I leaned in and kissed him again. This time, I was the one making the move, my lips pressing against his with a newfound confidence. Bruce seemed surprised at first, but quickly responded. deepening the kiss with an intensity that left me breathless. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer with a firm yet gentle touch. As we lay side by side on the couch, the closeness between us left no room for anything else. His warmth surrounded me, his presence filling the space completely. Resting against his chest, I felt a restless stirring inside me, a mix of desire, liberation, and an overwhelming sense of being alive again. I slowly sat up, his gaze following me. Those green eyes, so intense and focused, seemed to understand everything I was feeling without a single word being spoken. My heart pounded as I stood, driven by a boldness I had never felt before. My hands moved to the thin straps of my dress, the fabric suddenly feeling like chains holding me back. Bruce didn't speak. He simply watched me, his gaze unwavering. And that silent encouragement gave me the courage to continue. As my fingers slid the straps down my shoulders, the dress fell in a soft cascade to the floor, pooling around my bare feet. In that moment, I could finally breathe. It wasn't just a physical act. It felt symbolic, like shedding years of restraint and finally embracing my true self. When I looked back at Bruce, his expression was filled with admiration and awe. He didn't need to say anything. I knew he understood. This wasn't just about us. It was about me breaking free of my own limits, about reclaiming the parts of myself I had denied for so long. Bruce stood and reached out his hand. His touch, as always, was both tender and strong, grounding me in the moment. But this time, I wasn't just reaching for him, I was reaching for the part of me I had lost. For what felt like an eternity, I stayed in his arms, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. My heart raced, my body trembled. But for the first time, I felt truly alive. It wasn't fear holding me back anymore, it was freedom propelling me forward. Bruce eventually stepped back, his breathing still unsteady. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I'm going to take a shower," he said softly. I watched him walk away, his words lingering in the air like a promise. My mind remained fixed on everything that had just happened. The bittersweet joy of discovering a part of myself I thought I had lost forever. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living, not just existing. And as I sat there, wrapped in the afterglow of the moment, I knew my story was only just beginning.